Good evening, viewers. Welcome to the Face of Friday Night. Peter Shivazo, your host. Today is August 8. For some reason, the newspaper in front of me was actually reading August 9. It is for tomorrow. I almost said August 9. Yes. And with me in the studio, okay, all of them have been here. Chaz Romshana on the extreme left. Welcome, Chaz.
The Almighty God is great.
For whatever reason, either malnourishment or overfeeding, his hair is receding from the head. Richard Baguma, suffering from the very same disease. Welcome, Richard.
It's always a pleasure to tussle it out with you.
Was that with me? Actually, it wasn't supposed to be a tussle. And in the center, Friday night, doing the tie is OHT Wameda Dulubega Segona.
Good evening.
The other ones are suffering from a receding hairline. His is a graying self.
And the Gazette
A whitening hairline.
The OHT has been degazetted to now honorable.
Well, that's interesting. Good evening, viewers, ladies and gentlemen out there. These people are laughing at my gray hair. It's a matter of age. You will get there.
Well, we've been there, and we were fed better, so we didn't get the gray hair at that age. Well, viewers, we move on. Today, this week, one of those things that happen in the world, it happened many years ago. Students of history have seen it. Once in Berlin, when the strongest man in the globe sat and was in Berlin, he called the leaders and said, can we share this piece of cake down here? And in the Berlin conference, they shared Africa. They said, you can take this piece, you can take this piece. They lost what they had got. The Germans lost what they had got when they lost power. The great Empire Britannica, on which the sun never set, gained power and ran the world. But before them, the Portuguese had run the world. The Portuguese had come, discovered, the Spanish had walked the tail of the Portuguese, and of course the Romans before that. In the modern age, as the power of the Empire Britannica receded, the great Americas rose. And they tussled out in what is, in those English words, famously called hegemonic contention with Russia, in what was called the East-West divide and the Cold War. Africa, still the bride sought out at the time, old hag you would say, was fought for. A few African leaders, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Leopold Senghor, said no, we will go the non-aligned. We will neither be west nor east. Neither of them retained power. Each of them that purported to be non-aligned saw the door and they were kicked out. So you were either protected by the east or the west. I thought that era had ended until the new courtship began. China knocked. They did not want to know about democracy. They did not want to know about human rights. They wanted to know who had cobalt, who had gold, who had iron. And the African bride went to China. I still remember those pictures vividly of the African president in the great Chinese hall. The great man, the president of China, sat, and they lined up one by one. In those great West African words, Kabiesi Baba, they bowed and shook his hand. And the railways are coming. Uganda has 3 dams without going through the World Bank, Isimba, Karuma, the other one, the word, I forget the name. Well, things have been coming our way. Japan came, returned to the floor and said, I was here before. But because Japan barely has anything to give lately except a bit of technical power, there was no huge song. The Americans returned. And we'll start with those words of President Obama, hosting the African leaders at dinner. And then I'll have reaction from the gentlemen. Well, let's see if I can have President Obama.
I stand before you as the President of the United States and a proud American. I also stand before you as the son of a man from Africa. The blood of Africa runs through our family. And so for us, the bonds between our countries, our continents, are deeply personal. We're grateful for the ties of family. Of all the incredible moments of our trips to Africa, one of the most memorable was being able to bring Michelle and later our little girls to my father's hometown in Kenya, where we were embraced by so many relatives. We've walked the steps of a painful past in Ghana at Cape Coast Castle, in Senegal at Gorée Island, standing with our daughters in those doors of no return through which so many Africans passed in chains. We'll never forget bringing our daughters to Robben Island, to the cell from which Madiba showed the unconquerable strength and dignity of an African heart. We've been inspired by Africans, ordinary Africans doing extraordinary things. Farmers boosting their yields, health workers saving lives from HIV/AIDS, advocates standing up for justice and the rule of law, courageous women asserting their rights, entrepreneurs creating jobs, African peacekeepers risking their lives to save the innocent. And both of us stand in awe of the extraordinary young Africans that we've met.
The president singing the praises for Africa. The last time there was an opportunity like that, what came to us was AGOA. We abused it in Uganda. Some people benefited from it. I met several people from Southern America that still do the khakis that I put on. They sell them to America, they brand them American made, and then sell them across the world. Charles Romshana, you've looked at the trip, you've seen the African presidents. Of course, for me, the most memorable of it were the pictures. Mr. and Mrs. Obama in the same posture, in the same clothes. The African leaders come and stand in the middle. They stand, I think they were rooted at the same spot. And it was only when Kagame and Jacob Zuma came, not Jacob Zuma, the South African president, yes, Zuma, when they came, because Zuma, when Comrade Zuma came, he had his wife with him, so they had to create more space at the center. And so was General Kagame. He had his daughter, the towering one. Okay, if nothing else was beautiful, she looked elegant. Chaz, the benefits for us across Africa, the new bride, the bride again.
The Europe and of course America, for lack of time, fought against themselves, fought each other, fighting for Africa, and eventually they had to sit on the port of Marwa and shared Africa, the so-called Bahrain Conference. But if you are to look at it, because we're a continent, we're a continent that is has a developed culture, has developed civilization, and they are
possibly has lost civilization.
Has, I mean, we had our own developed civilization.
Yes, and lost them.
It could have been, and that is the fact. That is the point why you have to look at these fellows with a lot of suspicion, and that's the point I was trying to build. And they attacked it. It was attacked. But then if you are looking at yourself in relation to those other continents, then we should be moving in a specific direction that they are moving, and like unity. For instance, the African unity, we moved at it in 1960s. Europe is trying, moving at it in the European Union. America fought a very serious civil war to be united. But what is their response whenever they see these signals? Now, the philosophy of America is that it's very jealousy when it comes to military superiority and economic superiority. They can't afford to have any rival. And therefore, they will not allow any continent or any area that will unite for purposes of advancing itself in military and in economic terms. So Africa, therefore, is seen as a source of raw materials, was seen then as a source of raw materials, is still seen today as a source of raw materials. Now, when we attempted at African unity, what happened? Most of our leaders were decimated. those who thought for that, you know what happened in Angola, where we have a lot of resources. They have had a very terrible civil war sponsored by America. Talking about UNITA, you're talking about Zaire or Mobutu, and many more others. Now you go to the Arab world. They attempted at the Arab League. Where is it? It's collapsed. The Arab League attempted at Israel. They moved on the Arab League. At the time when African Union was joining the Arab League to condemn Israel, to isolate Israel, the Arab League turned around and recognized Israel. Morocco and Gaddafi were left on their own, and finally Gaddafi was killed. Look at the Soviets. The Americans facilitated the breakup of the Soviets. Look at the Balkan, the Balkans. Look at Yugoslavia. Look at the confusion now that is in Serbia. Look at Germany. It was divided into two after the World War. It has been united, but on their terms. And as I speak right now, Germany is part of their ally, and they are spying on it. They are spying on the Chancellor. Look at so you must have. They can't allow a dominant force in Europe that Russia rivals Britain. They can't allow it, and now you are having war in the doorsteps of Russia. Look at Asia, Pakistan versus India, and the two are nuclear powers. Look at the Koreas, North Korea and South Korea. America has a hand in it. Look at China, confusion with Taiwan. Look at China, confusion with Japan. America has a hand in it. So it's everywhere. And what is its strategy? It attacks your roots. It attacks your culture. It attacks your civilization. It attacks your religion. And these are the things that define you. So if someone tells you that, if someone aims at destroying your institution of marriage and advises you and compares you to allow a man marry a man, to allow a man have sex with a man, then you know he's up to something that is not constructive. So in other words, I don't look at and then now they also destroyed our own system that we had put up in the 1960s and 70s. The corporations, because we are looking at making business as a group, of course via the state, they destroyed that. They facilitated and encouraged corruption. Now the wealth of the many is in the hands of the few, and the few represent them. So even if they allowed you markets, because what are you producing? What are you producing here? They have destroyed the fabric of society. Now even this road that we are building going to Kabari, the road to Kabari, so later after Ntungamo, the complaint of the head of state at Rware that the fuel is being stolen. Even here, you can't have a site and you leave it to supervisor. They will steal everything. So there is theft at the center of power in the government. There is theft in the middle. There is even theft everywhere. You can't now afford to trust anybody. So even if they gave you markets, you do no longer have capacity, because you as a whole has been completely shattered, has been completely destroyed. So it is a merrymaking of the Americans and their agents, and they are now trying to see how best they share us. So we have had meetings with Japan. Our presidents have been there. Our presidents have had taken pictures with China. In China, they are now in America, and they will be somewhere else. How best do they conquer us without necessarily waging a war against us?
Richard, Charles takes us back to the age immediately after slave trade, and they're saying you do not have to be brutal to conquer Africa. Their leaders will sell to you anyway. Was this a market where the traders came to the table, and what was being traded?
I'm not sure that the 50 or so African leaders,
There were actually 49.
yeah, that were in Washington, had agreed on a common agenda. I'm not sure that they had a strategy at a continental level. I think personally that
Richard, you really paint them pathetic.
No.
You give them the impression of fellows called to a market, and each of them picks their bags and says, let's go. And they are coming from really a common angle where they would sit and say, John, you've been called, Uhuru, you've been called, what are we selling, where, how are we selling this? You are saying every one of them picks themselves up and says, this is my photo opportunity.
I believe that they must have had, some of them must have had discussions. The bilateral that you are talking about, Jakaya, His Excellency Uhuru, they are probably those. But as a common position of 49 heads of state at the African Union level, for example, or even at, let's say, ECOWAS level, I highly doubt that there were these common negotiating positions that people went with. And if you see, because you see, this was a summit with a series of processes. The first ladies had actually a program.
Yes.
The business forum was probably the largest, and that's where the media chose to focus. But there was a civil society. You know, just before there was a youth, more than 500 young people from Africa. The Nelson Mandela, whatever they call it, initiative, they give them very wonderful names. But even listening to some of the people who were in there, I have not had a common thread. So I'm not sure that existed. But looking at it from the side of Washington, it only makes sense to look at Africa. I think Africa has the largest unused arable land now in the world. This continent has the highest amount of fresh water sources not yet tapped. Apart from the Amazon, what they call the global commons, and you know climate change is such a threat at all levels, security, everything. We have the most untapped carbon consumers in our environment, and these are expanding. But also, we are a population that is young and growing very fast. I think we are surpassing 1 billion very shortly, and that's a market.
Indeed.
It's a market for Coca-Cola, it's a market for Nestle, it's a market for Chrysler. I mean, just
Okay,
yeah,
possibly not Chrysler.
no, it is. It is, because you know why? The African Development Bank last year told us that now we have slightly over 350 million Africans who are classified as middle class. And what happens is, the economic estimate is that when your household income is above $5,000 annually, and yours is,
I'm not sure.
you start moving away from basic consumption.
From Maktub to...
You start moving away from basic consumption. So who doesn't look at 350 million middle class people who have some disposable income? You know that the World Bank or IMF has 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies are in sub-Saharan Africa. It only makes sense that as a business entity, and for me I think America is, you look to this continent. Look at the mineral reserves. This continent has the proven, more than 10% of the proven oil reserves. But that is, we know that projections are that we shall probably be surpassing several other regions. Oil, gas, coal, gold, combined. So this makes sense. This only makes sense. But also labor-wise, this continent is being looked at as the largest global supplier of cheap labor. So really, it only makes sense that the Americans would be looking here too. Like Bloomberg said, the billionaire Bloomberg, he said, you see, look, we have not been going beyond the surface regarding looking at Africa. We have allowed China and Europe to go there before us. Now that's a billionaire speaking. I can understand where he's coming from. And that was the best. That's why you see focus is on the business forum. And there's tokenism, the usual tokenism. You know, American businesses have made commitments of $14 billion. What does that mean? For God's sake. I mean, so for me, this is a continuation of looking at the bride, which I think you mistakenly called the hag. Those ones who know how to play the bride know where to get the sweetest juices. And I think the Americans are jumping up now to the game.
Medad Segona Lubega.
Right.
What is in this for Africa? Because Richard perfectly describes the game at play for hegemonic contention. Only yesterday you had the BRICS meeting. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And they are setting up a bank to rival the World Bank. And they are looking for resources. There are no lies about that. The Americans are not even lying to you. They are saying you have resources and we need them. What is in it for Africa? Are our leaders smart enough to weave around this tangle and go home with something?
First, I want to agree with my colleagues. Their analysis, I think they are absolutely right. They simply need to add something. That what we witnessed is basically a reflection of either bad will, call it ill will, or simply that our leaders are not smart enough and they cannot match the Americans. We are continuing, obviously, to subject ourselves to the Americans, and we have no option because they are paying the piper. They've got to set the tune. Some are fighting for their personal survival. I cannot do or say this against the Americans, lest I vanish. And you're going to witness more and more of this. We have the resources. And the African leaders have consistently, persistently been saying this. What is stopping us from, tapping these resources? Is it capital? Or we simply do not have the brain to extract capital out of the resources we are talking about? You have the cheap labor, you have the land, but you cannot find the financial capital to extract that. I think I've been intrigued when he said, Mr. Maguma said that these African leaders could not even sit down and talk to themselves and say, guys, we are going to meet these guys, the rich man. What are we going to talk about? One, because everyone would assume maybe they did not invite President Kagame. So I'm going to get there and I'm ahead of Kagame. Maybe they did not invite President Museveni, etc. And they were going.
They were even wishing.
Wishing. I wish Kagame. Yes. It is my time to steal the show, and therefore ask the rich man to give me this and this and that, how I can survive. And I can tell you, they did not stop at that. If you went to investigate deeper, you would find that if each of them or any of them had a private moment with President Obama, they would tell him how so and so, President Chibazo is against American interests in Africa, etc. And those are the games that we've continued to play, and thereby subjecting our sovereignty to the Americans. And you cannot blame the Americans. It is the duty of the American voter to vote the best president, okay? To get the best brain, who is able to play the clearest of strategies, get the Africans to subject themselves to our rule, get this and this and this and that. We've been at the same level with countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And you've just mentioned, for they are sitting to say we can set up a bank to rival the World Bank. What is happening to the African economies? The monies that would set up another bank, a parallel bank, we are stealing it. For individualistic interests. So certainly we are continuing to go through this until such a time when we realize that we are actually endangered as a species. We are going to continue consuming American products, whether good quality or poor quality. We have no option. When they said they had given us an option in AGOA, what did we do? We got the meager resources that we had been able to save, and those that we borrowed, we gave them to some people.
Kananathan.
To Kananathan, V. Kananathan. We went to the villages and recruited labor for him. He even cheated those small poor girls. And when those poor girls are tried to assert themselves, the president said he was going to fire them. I remember asking a question, is the president a director in that company? How is he going to fire those girls? So the bottom line is the individual, the personal interests of African leaders have sacrificed the common goal. I think there's one common thing which united the African presidents: poverty. Because they were all poor and President Obama was looking at them. I don't know the type of suits they were putting on. Would look at them and say, oh my God, look at this man who is coming here to beg. He's coming in a new jet.
But Honorable Segona,
yes.
Hold on, because some of this is also a bit stereotype. You're talking about South Africa. South Africa is one of the biggest economies by any average in the world. Of course, Comrade Sisi didn't make the meeting because he was chairing a meeting of Israel and Palestine. And he's a big boy in every measure.
And a recipient of aid.
Well, he's a big boy in every measure because he can seat the different polars in the world at his table. You cannot call South Africa poor. You cannot call Angola poor. You cannot
Did Angola go? Angola didn't.
Well, their president didn't. Nigeria cannot be classified as poor. Ghana has been making strides in the world. What is it that the Africans are short of that makes them... I have a picture in front of me that is pathetic. Of African leaders, Jakaya Kikwete, I don't know who this is. I see the gentleman with the hat next door, who barely has a government. We are keeping his government in place. Jacob Zuma and Joaquim Kinsano lined up in a queue, waiting on each other. Please finish your turn so that I can shake the man's hand. What is it in the African mentality? Because it is not about poverty. These guys are not poor.
To get that opportunity, they threatened the strike.
And you see, Peter, I want you to understand this clearly. The poverty of the African continent is actually not in our pockets. It's in our brains. It is in our heads. You know, there is something called the Stockholm Syndrome. Even when you are not poor or you've liberated yourselves from poverty and you continue believing, oh, for us we are poor. So you may find the South Africans whose GDPs is far better than some of the European countries. They don't believe they have enough. They don't believe they have the resources to liberate themselves. So the Stockholm Syndrome, which has become a psychiatric condition and continues to affect our African leaders, is betraying us because, you see, they didn't believe they have enough. You can imagine, I saw my own president, President Joel Museveni himself, whenever he's meeting other leaders, his hat is ever on the head. But this time when he was running for this photograph, my friend, he even put off the hat. And that shows...
Well, Salva Kiir didn't put off his at least.
No, I know about my president. And this time, he even removed the hat. I don't know, he could even have left it on his jet, you know, knowing he's going to meet President Obama. I have never seen presidents that lower their countries to this kind of level. You know, I mean, how come it was Obama that everyone was struggling to have a photograph with?
Well, he was the host.
The bottom line is, we shall continue to be betrayed. I think it was Plato who said that, you know, countries get leaders they deserve. Those are the best we have.
No, we can't be that bad.
And
viewers, we return. A much more idealistic younger me read the essays of Yoweri Museveni collected by, I think he was an officer of the army,
Ori Amaza.
Yes. Beautiful essays about Africa. Condemned African presidents that strutted to the UN with the planes when their people were suffering from jiggers, and they weren't talking about Busoga at the time. It only happens subsequently.
It is in other African countries as well. There's a whole entire project, by the way, on jiggers.
Reading those essays, that Yoweri Museveni is not the Museveni that attended this summit. If you've read the essays by Nkrumah many years ago in that classic book, Africa Must Unite, even the poems of Leopold Senga, they cried of a spirit of Africa that was livid with an ability to spar themselves. When I heard some of the leaders, I had President Uhuru talk at the summit where he sat with a few of the East African leaders, sat with them, and they met the business community. And when Uhuru was thumping his chest, he was saying, we do not want aid, we are going to export improved products. And I said, okay, I read these many years ago when I was a student of economics. What has failed us? How do we move from this point where we have been, seemed like pegged forever, to the next point? Don't go away.